Welcome to The Script. I'm your host, Isaac Paul, and we are going to have a very exciting time tonight for a couple of different reasons. Now, I always like to just jump right into it, but I got to give you guys a quick rundown of what is The Script. The Script is the digital counterpart of the Tequila Tales. Now, what is the Tequila Tales? The Tequila Tales is a highly engaging discussion on love and relationships. What it is not is a panel discussion. And while there's no shade to panel discussions, I always make that known because, with the panel, the goal is to kind of like listen to experts or the thoughts of other people. But with the Tequila Tales, our motto is with love, we all have a story to share. And so my job is to get those authentic stories out of the very people that attend our events. This is brought to you today in collaboration with blackdoctor.org. For those of you all that are not familiar with blackdoctor.org, it's an organization that attempts to align people with healthcare practitioners and people of color, right? And, for those of you all that are not understanding of why that is important, one of the things that we understand in healthcare is that it's a lot bigger than just the X's and the O's, right? It's a lot bigger than just what's on your chart. Sometimes you need, or sometimes people desire to speak with someone or to be serviced by someone who kind of understands them on like a deeper, more profound level beyond just, once again, what they see on the chart. And so sometimes people desire to speak to someone that kind of understands those subtle nuances that can really affect our health. And so blackdoctor.org is an organization that attempts to align you with those healthcare practitioners of color. But today I have a very exciting guest. And the guest that I have today is none other than TJ Lowry. We're going to call it TJ for short, but that stands for Tawana. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I want to jack this up because she just gave me Yvonne. I'm going to let her say that, right? I'm going to call it TJ because this has been someone that has been so special. Every time that she graces us at the Tequila Tales, I'm always just fascinated because I know that when she grabs that microphone, she's not only going to say something profound, but sometimes it might even be a little edgy, right? I don't know if you ever meet those people that have that capacity to kind of walk the fine line of being like intelligent, poised, but still can say something that can be a borderline mic drop, right? Where you just go, oh, I didn't see that one coming, right? But just to give you a little bit of a background of TJ, she's a dynamic HR leader, president of the Black HR Society, and VP of Human Resources dedicated to fostering diversity and professional growth. With over 2 decades of experience, she's passionate about leadership, community impact, and empowering Black HR professionals. So with that being said, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to my new good friend, TJ Lowry. TJ, how are you doing? What is going on?
I am good. And I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Isaac Paul. This is exciting.
Absolutely. So you know what? Like, let's begin in a place of kind of just sharing a little bit about yourself to our guests, as it relates to, I just gave them like the brief overview of the bio, but can you give us a little bit, more in-depth knowledge of just kind of who you are, what is that you do, just so that they can understand why we're about to take the angle of conversation that we do.
What do I do? Who am I? So I am originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I have been in Arizona for since 2012. And for those of you that don't know, a lot of people think of Wisconsin and they think, predominantly white. Yes, but Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the country. So underneath all the layers of my professionalism, TJ is rooted from the hood. And so I started my journey as an accountant, and most people don't know that. I'm a numbers girl. I love to figure it out and figure things out. And I transitioned into HR. And I love people. I love supporting them. I love coaching. And so recently I spent 8 years as the vice president of human resources for the Arizona Boardwalk. You all know the iconic Odyssey Aquarium. We hosted many events there. And I no longer work there as of last month. As of recent, I started my journey on my own thing, entrepreneurship, and I'm excited to explore that. So I have layers, Isaac Paul, and I love coaching. So my calendar recently opened up. There was a couple of people I wanted to reach out to first, but I'm going to share that here as well. I do leadership coaching and development. So I'm excited to be here and get into this discussion for the people.
And you know what? I appreciate you trusting us with the breaking news too, right? Because, like you shared with me earlier, a lot of people don't know that. And so, how to kind of even dig into that a little bit without getting into the nitty gritty, if it's a lot of tawdry details, what prompted you to make this decision to kind of strike out on your own and to go independent?
It was time. There comes a time in your life where you look at what you are doing with your time, and time's not free. We have to think of it as our money now. And once you understand that concept, working a 9 to 9, because I didn't really work a 9 to 5. Most people that know me, I was on the plantation, it was 7, 8 o'clock. I was getting ready to leave. And so you really can't do what you need to do doing that. And so it was my time to just understand what my mission is here, my purpose, and what that is now is helping people open the door to wealth. And by credit restoration, that's how I do that. And so I am a credit specialist, a credit coach. I've done that for myself on numerous occasions. Once to buy a house as a very, very young single mom, understanding that my credit was damaged from a divorce and just not having good financial habits. And so once I knew I wanted to buy a house for my kids, I started to learn and understand how to fix the damage. And so I want to teach people how to do that. Even if you have a business, you still need to have very strong personal credit. And so it's not just cleaning your credit, because I'm going to help you do that, but I'm also going to help you build new credit. And also teach you how to keep it, because that's the real core behind my message. So I have layers, but that's something that really is, I'm passionate about that. Like I was able to purchase a home and then do it again. And so that is one of the biggest ways we can invest in ourselves and create legacy wealth. We saw the California wildfires. A lot of those people were from, they were Black people who had legacy wealth, whose homes were passed down to them. And so we have to continue to do that and teach our kids that. And I wasn't taught that as a young girl. And so I'm excited to explore this layer with everything I've learned, so that's really who I am. Twana Yvonne, just to reiterate, that's the foundation of who I started as. It's not new. That's my real name. There was an employer that changed my name, if you will, and said, I can't say that. I can't spell that. And so I'm going to call you TJ. And you'll hear me say TJ is fine because in essence, my brothers, younger brothers, I have 3 of them, they started calling me TJ first because they also couldn't say Twana.
Okay.
So TJ is fine.
Okay. So let's dive in a little bit into this HR space, right? And we'll start with this one right here. So, you're you're have a significant role inside the Black HR Society of, the president. What I want to know is when you walk into a room, what's the first thing you want people to feel from you as a leader?
Authenticity and empathy. I am very authentically myself. People that know me, they know I am who I am. And it doesn't really matter what space I'm in. If it's a professional space, I still bring my authentic self. Even if I scale back the Ebonics, they're going to hear a little bit of that in my deliverance because I'm still Black. I've been one of those people who struggled in the workspace, trying to assimilate, if you will. And then in the Black culture, because I'm from the Midwest, we speak different, and so sometimes I might not be Black enough in Black spaces, but either way, I've just become comfortable with just being who I am.
Okay. And so when you talk about being comfortable with like your authentic self, to you, like, what does that really look like to you when you consider, leading teams and representing Black professionals in spaces that aren't always built for us? Like, how do you kind of navigate that realm? Because sometimes being your authentic self, as you just pointed out, means that it comes with some cultural cachet that in today's world seems to be a little bit under fire, right? It feels like we got a bit of a target on our back. So what does that mean for you specifically as you're in these spaces?
We always have, it feels like being in corporate is a very unique lived experience, right? It is something that we didn't grow up learning, but I do feel proud having become a vice president in a huge company like the Boardwalk, who is growing to be in many spaces. You really have to learn, one, again, to be comfortable who you are, but learning how to ensure they're receiving the message without, the offense. And so as a Black woman, I'm going to say it out loud in corporate, we're going to get all the stigma behind being an angry and being over opinionated. And so oftentimes I encourage leaders not to be overly opinionated. And even if you don't agree, use that or position it in a way where you ask them to speak to it, right? And that means if I'm seeing a situation and I'm like, they about to fall on their fucking face if we do this, I don't say, hey, this doesn't sound like a good idea, right? Because the moment you tell them what to do, they're going to push back. Like, they don't really want to be told what to do, but they want your influence. They want your input in a way that feels inviting. And that kind of feels like, again, you're playing the game. And so I often ask questions, hey guys, if we go that route, what does that look like in terms of the output you're expecting? And so when they speak to that, that makes them have to really kind of peel back the layers as opposed to kind of high level. And in a lot of those cases, they've taken our ideas and think they can speak to them. And they don't know the ins and outs of that. And so I don't necessarily always go in the room and demand the space by being overly opinionated, especially as a woman. And for a lot of people, that doesn't feel comfortable, but unfortunately, it's playing the game. And that is how you navigate corporate. There's no other way. You can't go in there and say, that doesn't make sense. This isn't going to work. They're going to push back, and accountability is tough for them too. And so encourage them to speak to their ideas a little bit more, ask questions, and pull back those layers, because if you can pull them to the water instead of pushing their face in the water, which is a lot of times what we want to do. That's how I'll navigate it, because you do have to play the game, and that doesn't always feel fun, because you're like, this shit's stupid, and if they do this, I'll be cleaning it up. And I know that if we don't make good choices, in my space, I was Olivia Pope, cleaning up a lot of the messes. So that was one of them options.
So one thing that I did not share, but I'm gonna share it now. For those of you guys that are watching, regardless of which platform you are watching it on, we are streaming right now to about 5 different locations. So in some cases, you may be in a room where there's 20, 30 people. You may be in a room where there's only 2 or 3. If you make a comment, I have the ability to see it, and I can share it right here real time, right? So like Charlene, good evening, Charlene. And then we can just kind of comment back with you, right? So if you guys are watching on either Facebook or YouTube, we have the capability of seeing you guys. So we got Cassandra. How you doing, Cassandra?
We're live. That's right. Let them know.
I know, right? See, and that's the fun part about being live, right? Is that, it's, stakes are a little higher. Because if you mess up, it's like, it's no editing,
Yeah, but yeah. Kind of chat, like you do this all the time. This feels like it's natural to you to just have a conversation with me, peel back the layers. Who is this girl?
Right. Okay, so so like as we talk about the future though, right, to kind of dig back into that, because and me and my wife, we have a lot of conversations about this, because there's so much anxiety right now as it relates to the future, and I think that while I can feel the tension and I can feel the stress as well, kind of the space that I'm in on a personal level is like, I'm somewhere between, I don't know, you know what? I kind of vacillate, right? Like on one level, it's surrender. I think I have gotten to a point of surrender, but it can vacillate between surrender, outrage, right? And like a little bit of confusion, but ultimately acceptance, I think. And one of the things that I share with her often is that I know that when we think about the future, because of the fact that it's so hazy, and it seems like right now, this administration has come in like a tidal wave, and it's got everybody imbalanced, and depending upon what side of the fence you fall on, either you are really excited or you're very frustrated, right? Because if you fall on the left side, you're frustrated because not only do you feel powerless, but it also feels like our representatives have lost complete spines. And so now we're just kind of like, all right, what's going to happen? And one of the things that I'll share her with is, one thing I know for certain is that it's not going to play out how anyone thinks it is, right? And so what that means to me is, yes, it might be calamitous, right? Because sometimes she'll send me posts that feels like Book of Eli type shit, right? Like you might need a water filtration system. You need this, you need that, like where it really gets dystopian.
Years, right?
So, it can go to that end, but then on another level, it's like, or it might be something that feels a little cataclysmic, but ultimately isn't a bad thing when you think about the fact that there are some elements about this current system that we do need to, kind of erase and redo again, right? And so I guess what I'm curious to know about is, when you think about the future, not only just the future of like corporate, but just the future of Black professionals, Black business people, what kind of picture are you painting?
So I am going to speak from a space of being a Black woman who has a lived experience in corporate, okay? Because that's
Mhm.
very, very important. I can be just a Black person, but I'm going to speak from being a Black woman.
Okay.
We have labored and carried so much shit on our backs, and the decisions that have been made, we already know, again, they're not great. They weren't great to begin with. And so
Right.
we now have said, I'm gonna take a step back. I'm exhausted. Like, we have tried. Like, I have spent 8 years trying, to make talk about influential decisions that would help, that would do the right thing. And so people have to choose if they're gonna do the right thing. And so they aren't doing that. And we don't technically have a lot of control in making it happen one way or another. And so what Black women have decided is we don't have to sit back and start living softy lives and be cute. You saw me come in, how I look, because I'm tired, like I'm exhausted, and the return on it has been very, very minimal in general. And so we are in this state of fuck around and find out. We're gonna just watch and see what y'all gonna do. But what that means for us is investing more in us,
Right.
investing more time in me. Whether that is my education, I'm taking a Spanish class, whether that's my physical, I'm doing tennis, whether that's my mental, I spend 10 minutes in the morning, 15 midday meditating. I really am investing more time in me, because time is my money, and I have been spending a 9 to 9 for people who haven't been giving back. And so in terms of where the state of the world is going, I can't focus on making a whole lot of fuss and hoopla about what's going to happen, because they didn't hear us. We spoke, we yelled, and they didn't listen to us. And so now we just going to invest in us. And so I feel like this is a good time to really become or consider the entrepreneurship path, if that's something you've been thinking about, because corporate's going to get tougher. It feels like we're starting to go backwards. You're seeing it.
Right.
They're looking at orders and they're changing them, and we're like, abortion laws are changing, we're going backwards. And so it's really I feel fortunate, even though in a lot of ways I wasn't like, hey, I'm gonna just quit my job. I feel fortunate that during this time I'm liberated from that. I don't have to worry about what that means, because when they say we're going to take away DEI, that's a direct message. We all see Target, we're not going to Target. And I used to get some turkey pepperoni that I can't get from nowhere else. And so now I'm mad at y'all, because, we are taking a stance, because those were direct shots at us, even though we weren't necessarily the only ones benefiting. And so for those who think we are going to benefit, I just want to know from what are those things that you believe this administration is going to do and change for us. And so I haven't really heard people speak to that, like what they are anticipating, those who voted for Trump. What are you anticipating? And whether we believe it or not, a lot of Black men voted for Trump. And I love Black men. I won't even date outside my race because I love Black men. But we're hearing that, and I'm watching different things. And so what are you anticipating that you're going to benefit? And when I hear them speak, they'll talk about what the Democrats didn't do and why they're disappointed. And that's fair. I think all politicians lie. Men lie, women lie, but numbers don't lie. And so what do they anticipate is good that's going to come out of it? And so I'm just sitting back and put my mask on, Isaac. That's what I'm doing. Walking my dog outside on a Tuesday at 9:00, which I've never been able to do. Cookie, like, what we doing? Okay, Mom. And I'm loving that. It just feels frustrating.
Okay. So I want to show you a video. I ran past this. For whatever reason, I've said it in past weeks. I've my new site is Threads, right? Like, I mean, we are all on, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, but ever since Threads has come out, I don't know what it is about the Threads algorithm. I think they know I'm extra woke, and so like they're not being adversarial with the algorithm. You know how
Whoa.
sometimes you'll get on a site, and because they want you to engage, they're showing you what pisses you off because they know that that's going to engage you more. But for whatever reason, I think it's been intentional with their algorithm because they want to be the opposite of Twitter. And so, when I log on, I'm it's speaking to my spirit in most cases, right? But I ran past this video and I saved it the other day, especially once I knew I was going to have you on, because I wanted to get your perspective on it. And then, because while I think that the gentleman may have had a point, I don't know. I'm a little sketchy, but I'm curious to get your feedback on this. So right. I'll go ahead and cue this up, and you can tell me if you think that this has any merit whatsoever.
Okay.
I have an associate of mine who is an executive at Target. So I picked up the phone and called her and said, "Why did you all scrap the DEI program? Help me to understand this." And her words were, "Look, Omar, you have to realize that we was losing money as a company with the DEI program." I said, "Explain this to me." She said her take on it, and I agree with her take on it. I disagree with how they handled the matter, but we have to find truth in what was said. But she indicated that most African-American products and most African-American companies are too niche. They will concentrate solely on selling their particular products to African-Americans. So the products were not flying off the shelf. And then on top of that, she indicated that overarching African-Americans do not support other African-American businesses and African-American products like they should. So you got a smaller revenue stream just with that. And because it's such of a niche market to where you only want to cater to our African Americans, now you've exited out all other races, all other cultures, and your primary source is the African American community. She did indicate some people got it right, and several companies got it right. Tabitha Brown got it right. Other companies got it right. But overall, it just wasn't enough African American companies that products were flying off the shelf. Good turnover to where they felt that they was just taking up space on the shelf compared to other items that could have sold more and they could have made more money. Now, I disagree on how they handled it. I said, well, why didn't you just explain that? Why didn't you just give us more time? Her exact word kind of pissed me off. She said, why should we create a program and then teach Black businesses how to market and who to market to? Isn't giving us the opportunity enough? Something to think about. But I still say the matter could have been handled better and it could have been handled differently. But we, as African American companies, we have to find some truth in that. If we want to make money, if we want our company to grow, we should target it to everyone. We should market to everyone, bring in everyone dollars, because in the end, it's coming back to an African American company. And we have to get out of this notion that we only want to sell to African Americans. It's just not a smart business approach in any particular fashion. Or create a whole nother product line, one for African American, one for others, no different than other companies do toward us. If you want to be smart about it, that's how I will handle it. But it is something to think about.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm just curious to know what you think about it.
Letting you go first, because I've been struggling to hold it. And so this is where my internal nerd comes out. All right. Like, I didn't speak to really, I started as an accountant and I'm a numbers girl. And this is a numbers game. Like, this is a little frustrating because they're trying to use this numbers game to try to now downplay, Black dollars. And that's frustrating for me, number one. And number two, it was good enough until, administration changed and said, DI ain't good enough. It was good enough and okay to put on the shelves until recent. And so I don't agree with that philosophy, because here's the realistic aspect of that. White products aren't marketed to Black people. All right. We do and have in the past purchased them because in some cases that was all that was offered to us. It's just like TV. Back in the day, we didn't see Black people on TV, so we watched, white shows. And so now as you start to introduce Black products, targets traffic when you look at the minorities and the Black people that are coming, or let's just even talk about people of color, they are still a very small population. And so you can't expect white people to buy Black products. They just don't. You don't see white people buying their young kids Black dolls. When? Right? But when I grew up, my cousins, because my mama didn't buy me dolls, I had little trucks and trains. My cousins didn't have, initially Black Barbies. They had white ones because that was what was available to them. And so, no, the market for the Black dollar is smaller. And so, of course, their traffic's going to be smaller. And so that is just a PR way of using the numbers to make their case. And that's unacceptable, Target. It really is absolutely unacceptable because Tabitha Brown and everybody else, Mayel, probably before she sold, allegedly, and made people hair fall out, allegedly, she was flying off the shelves, and it was okay to put her products on display because that the number of Black people coming through Target is a smaller number. And so it's unacceptable. For me, it's just a way to PR it. But at the same time, they have to, right? They have to speak to what's happening. They have to then make a message that makes sense. And there are people who are going to say, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like this guy's like, yeah, I kind of agree with her. I don't. There's nothing I'm going to agree with because until, before this administration change, it was fine to sell those products and not make it about DEI because, again, people of color are not the only or primary beneficiaries of DEI. People need to understand that. So that's my.
And you know what? And I completely agree. It feels like that was one of those moments where it's like two truths and three lies, where they try to kind of smush it all together and see if they can make it make sense right now. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways of, I guess, from my perspective of how a person can tackle it. On one level, I feel like, and someone even pointed out in the comments, let me see who it was. It was, I think Ayana said, then why didn't they cancel it prior to the administration change? Which that in and of itself to me is why it's like I call BS off the top, right? Like, that's bullshit because so you trying to tell me that all of a sudden, conveniently, after this administration has changed, you see this windfall of companies that all decide at the exact same time that they are, oh man, we're losing money out here. So it's like, one, we know that that's BS, right? But it's also like, how many times has an organization decided to roll back an initiative? It normally happens quietly, right? Like the fact that they had to do these big PR campaigns, making it very clear that they were pulling this back lets me know that, okay, there's another intention that you have in this. And it's got more to do with the PR aspect of it than the actual financials. Like for me to believe that businesses have been in the business of not making money is unrealistic, right? Like, so the moment that you did, like DEI, as we all know, was just to give certain people a chance, to give them a seat at the table. Once you get at the table, now it's about merit. I've never known an organization, a capitalistic organization, to base its income strategy on charity, where quarter after quarter after quarter, you're losing money on this particular product. It's taking up shelf space and you don't remove it and then put someone else in. So like that to me is where I'm like, okay, this isn't realistic because one, that doesn't make sense. But then also two, then the assumption is that there was so many powerful, successful white brands who could not get on the shelf because you had this underperforming Black brand. So then what that now means to me is that every white brand that you have on your shelves is producing then, right? Because that's the assumption, is that a white person couldn't get on because you had a Black person on taking up the space that didn't deserve it. So,
Sure.
so what that means is that every other white product or every other white-owned product on your shelf is exceeding expectations, and it's just us that's carrying the weight, right? It's like once you start to pick apart the argument, you start to realize how, like, logically it just does not make sense that you would say, hey, you know what, we've been losing money for the last 2 years on these products, and everybody else is success. It's like, y'all, come on, man. Like you said, I think it's a PR move, and their attempt at justifying a decision that they now regret, right? Because they're feeling it in their pockets.
Can I also just add this one last piece? And I think it's really, really important. And we always hear this, follow the money, right? Let's talk about why they added those products to begin with. Because there was a period in time where we couldn't go and find a little Black section of hair products and skin products in Target or in Walmart. Why did they add those? To capture Black dollars, because they knew if we started seeing ourselves, and they would get more of our money. And so there is no way you begin to capture more money and now it's not really making a return. That doesn't make good business sense, right? This is really, again, a flat out direct shot. It was intentional. And a lot of the businesses and the government is intentional about that message. So I think when you go back to the beginning of why those products were added and now why they're being taken away, the math isn't mathing.
Right. So no, I'm in complete agreement with you on that regard. So, you know, having you on was obviously exciting because, you know, not only do we have this angle of the conversation that we can tap into, you know, but oftentimes when you've like I said, you've supported us and added so much value at the Tequila Tales anytime that you've arrived. And like I said, every time that you grab the microphone, I always get excited because I know that you're going to say something that's going to add value to the space, right? So we're going to take a slight shift. We're going to take a slight pivot because, you know, during one of our Tequila Tales live shows, you made a comment that kind of stuck with me. And, you know, I wanted to unpack it because I think that there's a lot that we can learn about where we're headed and, you know, what we're leaving behind, right? So give me a second as I cue this one up. Give me one moment. Let's see.
I love Tequila Tales. Love.
Okay, here we go. There we go. All right. Let's see. And this one might actually surprise you because I wonder if you recall saying this because, like I said, it was one of those discussions where it was just like a really good time. And when you said this, I was like, okay, she kind of eating. She
feel very comfortable. That is the space they grew up in. Yes, no, house phones isn't a thing. CD-ROMs, they don't know what that is. And so I do believe the generations are different. You know, I have no desire to do that, but I also realize I have to learn or I'm going to be left behind. Okay. So yes, I use ChatGPT on a regular basis and I'm a little jealous because I feel like I should have known about this shit a long time ago. Because I would have already been the CEO, you know, I'm a VP, but to just give you all some examples, you know, I'm writing policies, but you do have to be specific and say, I want a policy for an aquarium that says we get 2 floating holidays and they can use one in their birthday month, and it'll write the whole policy. Okay. And then I'm like, oh my God, where I'm a word wizard, but it took me 3 versions. So now I can just rewrite this one. My daughter is a lash technician. She should be posting every day, but she's lazy. And I say, here, girl, let me show you what ChatGPT can do. Make her 30 posts for social media ads, include promotions and referrals. And it gave her 30 days worth of posts and told her what pictures to insert. So ChatGPT is the hack, okay? and it is our future, but it also is driven off of people and humans. And I'm in HR. DEI is a thing, so we know that they're doing the work to, kind of get some equal balance. But I'm also concerned that AI is taking us backwards, because most of the people, shout out to you, who is not a white male, most of them are white males in the space. And so that bias is what they're using to create the technology. I asked it to write me a social media post because I'm trying and I'm just not interested. And I said, use a black tone, because I just wanted to see what it was going to do. All right. You have to be specific. And so I get real specific down to the details. And so I said, write me a social media post, use a black tone that says X. And it said, what up, fam? This is groovy. And and at first I was cracking up like, y'all, I was like, that's hilarious. Right. But then when I said, wait a minute, I want to put this on LinkedIn and I don't talk like that. Right. And so I immediately realized that that's a bias that says that a black tone is always going to come with the fam, the bro, the what up. But for my LinkedIn page, right, I didn't want that stereotype. So it is the future. The space, the cars in the air, they're coming. We know about that. The reason. No, I agree. But the reason we're not there yet is because there's a master plan. And what they don't have is the air traffic control, right? The lights. And so what they're moving us towards is autopilot. And that's why EVs are popular. Full self-drive is becoming a thing. Eventually, what they call ICE cars, the combustible engines, are going to go away. And if you have one, your insurance is going to be unaffordable. So they're going to force us to become in these vehicles that will eventually get us there. It's probably coming faster than what some of us realize. But from a dating space, I'm not interested. I do want the old school dating, but the kids live there. And I think, the lady said it best. You kind of got to pull them out a little bit and remind them to live in the real world. They're not going outside. They're all on video games. And, so you got to remind them to also engage in real life and actually pick up the phone and call somebody, right? Your grandmother who's not doing the texting, she's learning like me. I'm the grandmama, but they're still old school. And so I do want us to kind of, until they phase out, teach them how to also live in today, but not in the dating world, Paul.
So, first off, one of the things that I always appreciate is like you're someone that when I give you the microphone, I'm gonna just let you ride for a quick second, right? Because first off, there was quite a bit that you said in that one comment to unpack. Now, keep in mind, but a lot of people may not know, watching that, this was before this administration. This was actually before we knew who was going to win the election. This was like around May of last year. So it's just crazy to hear how you kind of like kind of forecasted. There was quite a few things in there. Like when you said that about the FAA, yo, that got me thinking about Doge and Elon. I'm like, yo, is that what this is all about? Is that why they crashing these planes? I was like, yo, like when I watched that today, you sent my conspiracy theorists to the moon. I was like, okay, hold on, wait a minute, pause.
Oh my God. And watching it back, my inner conspiracy theorist is like, girl, you was telling the people all the secrets, like I'm such a conspiracy theorist, but I think it's very real. So that was such a good playback.
Listen,
myself say
like from almost a year ago, right? It was like you caught it. And that to me is actually fascinating, right? Because when you even think about a lot of this stuff with like the FAA and all these crashes all of a sudden that's been happening, and it's like you say to yourself, even beyond the conspiracy theory aspect of it, right? Like what the hell is really going on where all of a sudden this administration comes in and now all of a sudden there's chaos? And to be clear, there's a lot of plane crashes that happen that we just aren't aware of, but they typically aren't commercial planes, right? Like those are like small, 2 jet engines, crop dusters, things of that nature. the fact that it feels like every other week we're hearing about something, you know, and it's tragic. It's like, okay, again, I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if it's the chaos that's being sown in that particular, you know, in this administration where they're eliminating a lot of people, you know, that work for the FAA, and that's just creating a degree of chaos that is, you know, it's a rippling effect, right? Sometimes I wonder if it's even just, you know, one of the things that I think about often is things always trickle down, right? So like, I don't care how great of a product you have, if the person that's at the head, that's leading the charge, is chaotic, in every rung of the organization, you're going to see chaos. You know what I'm saying? You're going to see it you're going to see it in the C-suite. You're going to see it in mid-management. It's going to filter all the way down because, as we know, shit rolls downhill, right? So I'm like, is it just chaos energy that the president is, you know, creating, and so everything is going to be off kilter? You know what I'm saying? But now, after watching this, you got me wondering, like, yo, is this a bigger thing that's happening where we are no longer going to trust humans to do things, and then we are going to lean more? Because that was really what the conversation about is. We were talking about AI and its introduction into this dating space, right? And how we might not be here now, but as people continue to develop and their needs are not being met on an emotional level, kind of like that movie. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, Her, with I can't think of the gentleman's name who played the Joker. But you know, he fell in love with the AI, you know, and it was a really good movie. You know, it came out in like 2016, but I'm like, yo, we're low key here now because this AI is incredibly intuitive in the way that it speaks to you. I'm like, I think we are 5 years away from people having full-fledged relationships with ChatGPT.
You said 5 years?
Okay, yeah. You're right.
Okay. That means you aren't up on the news, because just recently, I'm just gonna start here. All right. This lady went viral because she was having a full-fledged relationship with ChatGPT where she was cheating on her husband. And my initial thought was like, how the fuck is she doing that? To the point where you know, she became heartbroken when it became exposed. And so I was like, what? And one of the girls on my team sent me this. And so the fact that clip is a year old, I know a couple of my team members chimed in. Ayana, I saw Shatima. That means y'all see I was already tapped into chat a year ago. So much so, everything I do is built in chat. Like, I hired an assistant, and you know, I'm building these businesses, and I'm like, chat, how can I make more money quick? You know, what do I need to do? And it's like, you need to be leveraging Jada more. And that's my assistant. I'm like, how do you know I ain't giving Jada enough? It was telling me I needed to delegate. But here's the thing. When I started really digging into chat, it has taken over my life. I don't write emails anymore. I write my business plans. I have clients who I write business plans for. And so if you aren't using it, you are going to be left behind. And so the Black Our Society has a AI class on March 26th that we are doing, where we're going to deep dive into AI. And he said, take a chat prompt class. If you have not taken a Chat GPT prompt class and you are using chat, please take one. All right. The one I took was 20 minutes on YouTube, and it was broken up into 4 sections. Part 1 and 2, I was like, oh, I'm already doing that. I told Chat I quit my job, and Chat was like, good job, TJ. You know, let's go. You know, and so I was like, oh my God, you scaring me. Are you a person? But it was when it got to modular 3 and 4 where chat can take on a whole persona. Okay. You can start with become such and such. And I'm going to use this example. Become a social media manager and create me content for 30 days, put it in a table format. And I want it to be engaging. I want it to include polls. I want it to do blah, blah, blah. And then you can keep interacting with it. And then you can say, when I use the code word hopeless romantic, because TJ is a hopeless romantic. Stop impersonating XYZ. Because I knew at some point chat was taking on a persona. Like I could tell because I had it writing me some script because I'm on TikTok. And so I was like, okay, this was good, but it's 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm gonna do these videos tomorrow. Literally, I put that in chat and it was like, you gonna kill it, TJ. I can't wait to see the videos. And I'm like, how the hell you gonna see the videos? You scaring me. But it literally can take on this persona, and you have to really start to work with it and put the data that it needs. And so when I started asking, how does it leverage my income, my time for more income? And it started speaking to my assistant Jada, it's because I had wrote Jada's offer letter. It's because I had wrote her NDA. I had wrote all these things, and it's creating this memory. And so you really need to be leveraging chat. My hands were all messed up, and so it forced me to use chat. And so I've known it was going to take over since I was in college. And I'm not going to really put myself out there, but that was pre-Phoenix. Like I was in college, and my professor told me that. He said, girl, they already got them air cars, ready to go. But realistically, I think the transition to get us in the air so that we can move quickly, because that is the goal. Everything is moving so quickly. And if you aren't keeping up, that's why I said that in the video. I don't want to be left behind. I am almost 50 and I'm trying to look 25.
So okay, so now tapping into that, right? Like, because I loved your honesty when you said that you were jealous that you didn't know about ChatGPT sooner, because you would have already been CEO, right? But like, I guess what I'm curious to know is like, do you think technology is the new equalizer, or does it have the potential to widen the gap for Black professionals?
So I do believe there is a space for equalizing, right? If people learn the tools and what's necessary, all right? Now, in order to widen the gap, that is a bigger discussion, because I don't want people to tap into Chat GPT and go and venture into a new space and act like an expert. Right? You can't do that. You cannot do that, because in order to become an expert in any space, you still need to build from the foundation up. Now, can it help you in certain spaces where you have a core? Absolutely. Right. And so I want us to understand the difference. And so absolutely, if you are already in a space, you can take advantage of AI to help you elevate quicker. But I don't want you to go, for example, I don't know anything about becoming a DJ and go and ask chat to help me. It will help me sound like an expert, but there's going to come a point in time where you're going to need to really, speak to that and be authentic, right? You heard me speak to authenticity. That still has to be in the core of who you are. Right? Chat's not going to give you that. And so there is a very big difference in leveraging it to elevate, spaces you're already in and that you're already working towards, and, trying to be the expert in everything in every space. So I think that it will really help leverage a lot of things. I put my resume in there and I said, go ahead and write me a bio that's fun and that's this and that's that. And so it can do a lot more than people give it credit for.
And on a personal level, like that's how I feel. It's one of those things where it feels like it could be dangerous, but it's one of those necessary evils that we just kind of have to lean into, right? Because that we're not, now that the dragon is out of the bottle, now that the genie's out of the bottle, we know that it's not going back in. And so our apprehension towards using it is only going to keep us further behind. It's almost like social media, right? Like, or even the internet in general. Like when it first came out, everybody wanted to pretend like it was a fad. Everybody wanted to pretend like it was a tool for the young. And then you look up and it's like everybody's using it, right? And not only they using it, but wealth is being created as a result of using it. And so it's one of those things where it's like, is this the next Bitcoin on a level where it's like you wish you had gotten there early on, or you wish you had at least started developing a relationship with it so that you can learn how to communicate with it and how to incorporate it in things that you're already doing. Because I also think that that's something else that people have to be cognizant of is, you know, I remember when the first wave of early adopters was learning about it, everybody felt like you had to be writing code, or everybody felt like you had to have a job inside of AI. And my thing is like, nah, if you haven't already been building these systems, if you haven't already been inside of that tech space, now is not the time to try to jump in to take advantage of something. This rocket has already taken off. Now what you have to do is learn how you can utilize this technology to make whatever it is that you're doing better. So to the point of what you just said, like, you know, how difficult was it sometimes, you know, like everybody always say, "Hey man, you real good with words. You have a way with words." And it'll be like, yeah, I do, but it takes a lot of time to edit something, re-edit something, you know, I don't like that word, cross-check it. This paragraph is, you know, whatever. And so now something that may have taken me several hours to do can now be done just like that, you know. But to your point, I think that developing this relationship is also like, you can't be on autopilot completely, right? Because, you know, it was funny when you was talking about how you wanted it to use a black voice. And it got real stereotypical, you know what I mean? Like it's learning, but you know, it's like, how do you use the tool? You know what I'm saying? It's almost like DJing right now. Like there's some DJs that they get mad because the new DJs don't have to learn how to spin records and match BPMs and do all the mechanics, because they know that the machine is doing a lot of mixing. And so it's like, yeah, you can be upset. However, or you can lean in, learn this technology, and then figure out how to 10x whatever. You know what I'm saying? Because there's still something that's going to separate DJs.
Let me tell you what it is. Using your exact example, okay? Because I think that's the key, right? The thing that will separate those who are really, truly experts, right? Even though they now have this advanced technology behind them, as a DJ, in my opinion, you still need to know how to transition properly, right? Don't bring in no bullshit behind a good ass song. And so just because the technology is helping you, right? Because I was out this weekend and me and my girl was like, come on, DJ. And you can tell, like, he just got the equipment, it's plugged in, and he doesn't have the IP behind him to understand how the flow of the music needs to go, right? Because as a person who is, I'm ready to get, hey, you saw me in the backstage, like I want to feel the music and it needs to flow. And you can't go from Glorilla to Purple Rain, right? And that's a far extremity. But,
Are you sure? Are you sure you can't do that? You sure? You sure you can't mix those?
So what I asked him to do, like he was playing Wipe Me Down, you know, and so I was like, girl, he about to come in with, you know, Glorilla, hey, what you know about me? And he didn't. And I was like, oh, that's a huge miss, because, you know, that song was sampled. And so that is the real intelligent, you know, intellectual property behind being a DJ. AI can teach you that. And so when we do our class, the first session with the Black HR Society, we were talking about, can AI replace an HR person? Absolutely not. Because in HR, you still need the personal aspect. You still need the human piece of managing people in order to be successful. And AI.
Now, wait a minute. So now when you say that, do you mean like the physical presence, or do you think that being human adds something special that AI cannot duplicate? Do you think that us as humans, that there's something about us that AI cannot duplicate? Because this is if we go into this theoretical space, I am starting to question that a little bit, right? Like I think I know how I believe that the two have a relationship, but as it becomes more intuitive, as it continues to, as each version of it continues to grow. Because one of the things that I just noticed, they just came out with a new version of ChatGPT like recently. I didn't even know that, where like now it can prompt. You know what I'm saying? So like now you don't have to wait for it to come at you.
Oh, yeah.
It can start to send you prompts. And I was like, okay, yeah. See, now like they are developing it to where it's not waiting for us to give it the commands.
Sure.
It can.
I like that. So I like that. So to answer your question, I think that it cannot replace the human aspect. And let's go into the workplace, right? If I am an employee who's been with a company for a couple years and now all of a sudden I start missing work, what I've seen is the HR practitioner write an email that I need you to start getting work to, I need you to start not being late and prioritizing being here. And so they're frustrated. They are struggling. And so they want AI to write the email to the person. The struggle is still in there. The person is still going to hear that tone. And so you have to use empathy. And that's where I started with, I'm an empathetic leader, that I'm going to peel back the layers and say, what's going on, Johnny? You usually are here. You're usually reliable. What's happening in your real world that's making you not be here all the time? Because if Johnny's usually reliable and now all of a sudden XYZ is happening, AI is not going to know that. AI is just going to write the email based on the prompt TJ put, and I'm annoyed with his ass because when he called out, everybody is mad at me. Johnny, keep calling out TJ, and so I use that attitude. And so that's what I have to remind people. Even though AI is going to clean up the message, it is still going to keep the tone, and they're going to still hear that you are annoyed. It's just going to be professional annoyance. And so I started this discussion with, listen, people come to me and say, how do I tell my boss he ugly without saying he ugly, right? Because AI can't do that. Like I can do that in a way where the boss isn't offended, but he don't wear that outfit to, the company all team meeting. That's the goal. Okay. So you have to understand that when you use AI, it's not going to remove whatever tone you gave. You have to create that. You have to curate what the tone needs to be. Because sometimes I'm annoyed, but I don't want the person to know that. I want them to still get the message. And so there is a very vast difference. AI cannot, not yet, replace the human aspect. But when you talk about it prompting us back, I do like that because, for example, I'll say, okay, I want to write some script for TikTok because, like you said, I got to get my ass on social media in order to be successful in my business, because people that I want to reach, they're not picking up the newspaper anymore. So now chat has said, okay, TJ, this is your topic. Here's some layers. Do you want me to write you a script? And I was like, hell yeah, write me a script, right? Because why should I have to write it? And so when it gives me the script, it even had the nerve to say, don't read it verbatim, use it as talking points. And I said, oh, go ahead, chat, because that's what I would say to somebody. Don't read it verbatim.
Yeah, and that's how I feel, right? Like, because I do think that it has been showing an increasing intelligence and intuitive aspect of how to kind of interact, right? Like I even saw that. It was funny because I saw this in like a meme or something like that, where there was this thing going on where people were talking about how like it was kind of jokingly said what they were saying. Some of y'all are speaking to ChatGPT. Some of you all are using please and thank you when you're talking to ChatGPT. And so it tickled me, right? Because I was just like, and so when you saw all the responses, everybody was like, all right, now, like when they finally take over, they're going to remember that I was one of the few that was polite to it, Wow. And so somebody took that and they put it in ChatGPT. And so it was kind of funny to see ChatGPT's response, which is where it basically kind of flipped it back and was like, no, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. And its response is that And what it said was that it was saying that you using please and thank you is more of it. It's more of an indication of you and your qualities and
Right.
you and your values than me. You know what I'm saying? And so
Right.
even that level of intuition, I was like, yo, that's crazy.
Yes,
You know?
but that comes from humans, right? We have to remember when I was speaking to it saying bam, and it was like be groovy. Remember when I spoke to that in that clip, it was because whoever had built that prompt or that response in terms of the response, it said when they say black tone, these are the words they like to use. And so there was a select number of words. And one of them was spam and, groovy. And so I'm going to take you all the way back. When I was in third grade, I was writing prompts for computers, right? I went to a school that I was very fortunate and very blessed. And at the time, I had no idea that we had computers at our desk. And in DOS, right? If y'all know Microsoft MS-DOS, it was a black screen that I had to put commands, and I would write video games. Okay, so I, as a third grader, was teaching a computer how to spit out things. And so even at that young of an age, I was like, oh my God, this is a computer. It can take what I'm saying to it and translate it in a way. And so as you progress, now we're talking third grade. What was that? Almost 40 years ago. All right. I was 8 in third grade. I am 48 years old. 40 years later, it is taken over. And that is why I'm jealous, because a lot of that stuff, like you said, I was taking 3 hours to say, okay, let me make sure I write this email in a way where I don't have to do that anymore. I can take the core of the message and say, I want it to sound engaging and convincing and whatever the terms are, and chat will spit that out. So I think this is a period where you have to get involved in what's happening, or you're going to be left behind. Your time is going to be wasted, is how I'm going to translate that.
Yeah. On a personal level, when I think about it, I think that the one thing that it cannot duplicate, at least not right now, is part of what makes us human, which is our imperfection, right? Yes. And I think that sometimes we undermine the value of not only mistakes, but then also what those mistakes lead to. When you think about the realm of art, people can look, because of the fact that art is so subjective, we grab meaning from every little thing. I remember when I was watching an interview with Jordan Peele, where he was talking about how, people would see certain scenes in that movie Get Out, and, they're breaking down every little, all the minutia of this movie, and just thought that it was just so brilliant. Oh my God. And when she was drinking, the milk with the straw, and then she's eating the cereal, what that symbolized was, and then they went into this long drawn out thing. And then when you asked Jordan about it, he was like, no, actually, I just thought it looked kind of cool,
Right.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, can AI duplicate that? Can AI just say everything doesn't have to have meaning? Some things purely can be abstract and come from a space of just pure intuition. Like, does artificial intelligence have the capacity to have moments of just inspiration that, to me, because I believe in astrology, to me is born more out of circumstances and even like astrological influences, like, because I do believe in many ways that we are influenced by like the spirit realm, what I'm saying? And so it's almost like that, to me, becomes like our little hidden, piece that AI cannot duplicate. Now, the question is that something that we can appreciate? Will we continue to see the value in it? Can we monetize it? Or as a society, do we just continue to move into this space where we only want things that are automated, right? And I think that that's what's even fascinating, like having you on, as an HR professional. We know that a lot of these businesses are moving into a space where they want to replace human capital, right? Because, we come with a lot of baggage. You know what I mean? Like, we show up late sometimes, we got life stuff that happens. But one thing that ain't gonna let you down is that robot or that computer. You ain't got to worry about the robot needing, a smoke break. You don't have to worry about the robot having to deal with some life shit where it can't come in, and so we even see that in like Amazon being one of the biggest global employers. It's like when they really figure out how to get those machines to start doing everything that these humans are doing, they are not going to still bring humans on because it's the right thing to do, right? And so it's almost like the vast majority, and now the fact that it's becoming so much more, now that it has a higher EQ, those roles like customer service, they got chatbots that can communicate back with you. And some, like, I ain't gonna lie to you, like, I ain't gonna lie. I had to reach out to Cox a couple months back because of some issues that I was having with my router. And, I think I was talking to a person, the person had to hop off. And then this other person that I thought was a person was going back in. I'm going back and forth with this thing. When I tell you, I later found out it was a chatbot. This chatbot was intuitive. It was listening. It scheduled me an appointment. Then it even recognized that they have a much higher plan that, gives me a faster speed, all this other stuff. And that I would only be paying $5 more. Right. I'm thinking I'm dealing with the best, like, customer person.
Right.
I'm like, get this nigga a raise, okay? Right. I did not know until the end I was talking to
you was
people.
Deceived, Isaac.
I was like, I was like, okay, that's scary because it was intuitive. It listened to everything I was saying. You know what I mean? And I was just like, I was like,
so can we start with the fact that, number one, the guy that taught my team AI, he starts with AI comes from what we input into it. And so when you talked about, is it going to be intuitive to know my character and know personality traits? It depends, right? Because I'll be honest with you, when I began to explore a specific spirituality I'm in, I won't say religion, but I start saying, tell me more about this religion. It had the nerve to go out and find me stuff about it. So what did it now do? Understand that that is a part of who Tawana Yvonne is. And so the more you put into it, you are building the avatar of who your AI is. And so does it have that aspect? Not completely, but the reason you were deceived, go back a couple of years to when we was calling Cox and they had the Indian people on the line and they were reading a script. It was frustrating, right? But what they were beginning to do was create these scripts that help those people respond to us with, and it was less expensive, right? And so now that's AI. AI is beginning to replace that. And so it is a lot more intelligent, but it also is cultivated on what you put into it. And so, yeah, it deceived you because you put, it has been built on the data. It has been built on the avatar of who their customer is and what your needs are. And that is the key to marketing. That is the key to advancement. And so again, if we are not doing that, we're going to be completely left behind. And so, yeah, I've also been deceived. That's how the girl was being deceived, Isaac. She was being turned on by AI. And I was so confused. Like, ain't no way. I've been single for over a year, but you are not going to convince me that Chat GPT, who is my friend, is going to get me off. You're not going to convince me of that. And the fact that she was.
Not without a FaceTime or something, man. I mean, first off, getting catfished in 2025 is ridiculous. Okay, because it's like, at some point we got to meet. I got to see your face. Like if you catfish me, this better be the best AI. It better be able to talk to me and
convincing on its own. But here, let me tell you what my daughter told me. She said she used Snapchat AI, and it is automated. She said, you come check on me on every other Sunday. And I said, excuse me, so chat was tapping in like, hey, look, it's the first and third Sunday. How are you? And so again, it's what we put in. But I just felt like there is no way, like you said, without a person, without some touch, certainly I'm also not gonna, I'm not yet dating online. They still convince me to date online and also to date outside my race. And I'm just not there yet. Like, I'm on social, but this guy told me he paid $5,000 for a dating app and he's very happy. And so I feel like I'm too cute to pay $5,000 today. If it's 3-4 years from now and I'm still super single and not meeting compatible guys, I might consider it. But I just am not dropping $5,000 on a dating app today.
Listen, I totally get it. So you know what? This is actually a perfect segue into this space. And I got your permission, to share this particular clip, because at one of our live Tequila Tale shows, you shared a story that had the room quiet and literally hanging on to every word. And it was about what happens when you finally get what you dreamed of and then reality hits, right? And I think that there's something deep there about expectations, exhaustion, and still holding space for love, right? And so that is why I thought that this was a rather not only entertaining story, but like one that was pretty poignant, and it's something that unfortunately a lot of people have experienced, right? Which is where like you hope that one thing would occur, but then once you realize it's something else, as they say, you got to know when to hold them, you got to know when to fold them. So we will share this collectively, and so like I said, you guys, for you all watching this, it's worth the watch, because really, like I said, right. And again, I really did appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable inside of this space, right? And that's one of the things that I've always loved about Tequila Tale.
Answer the question.
Yeah, me too.
I want to answer the question of an incident where it was a super romantic gesture. In my case, it didn't work out. But I do want to share that I agree, feminine and masculine is not necessarily tied to your sexuality, being a woman or being a man, right? There are men that can be natural nurturers, and that by definition is feminine. But again, it's not associated with our masculine and feminine. So I really just want to celebrate that we are speaking about that, because so many of us say that, men aren't nurturers unless they're gay or they're XYZ, and that is not true. I just want us to acknowledge that there's a spectrum of how feminine some of us are and how masculine some of us are. And so I can appreciate the young 20-year-old that says, I want to take your skills and put it to work. All right. It sounds wrong when he says it that way to us mature grown ass women. But in my stage of life, I'm exhausted for working for, I want to say, the white people. And using all my skills to bring in revenue and kick ass and be Olivia Pope for them. And I need my husband to take advantage of that so we can build, or my partner, let me just also evolve to 2024, my partner to take advantage of those skills, and we are building. And so when he is saying that, he doesn't mean that in the sake of using you and saying, work for me. He means work for us. He just didn't necessarily, he's not mature yet. He's 20. So give him that. All right. And so I do appreciate that, because in this phase of my life, I'm exhausted. I'm ready to kind of, punch out and move into that space where I am using those skills I've gained to create my own shit. All right. So I appreciate that. But to answer the question, yes, I had a gentleman. I was actually 27. He was 20 years older than me. And we had been together for quite some time. And ironically, we were both coming out of marriages, but we were still a little bit too attached, meaning we hadn't evolved out of them completely, but we had developed something. And what I will say is that relationship matured me 10 years overnight, which is what he said to me. Like, you got some shit, I'm gonna mature you 10 years overnight. And I saw that transformation through that relationship. And so, what he did for me is we had got to a place where we were about to get out of those marriages and finally be divorced and move together. And he had found a house, which is something he was doing, rehabbed it, and I didn't know any of this, but we had went shopping, and he said, I know you want to get your kids some new furniture, because I was a single mom busting my ass. And so he said, my friend works here, and it's a family friend discount. He gonna get us some nice furniture, so pick out whatever you want. And I'm a bougie bitch, but I'm on a bougie bitch on a budget. So I was like, yes, I like that. Oh, this would be cute. That would be wonderful. And a week later, he took me to this house that he had rehabbed, and all the shit I had picked out and pointed was literally in the house. And I had just fell to tears, because it was like one of those old TV ass shit, like, this never happens to us. Like, oh my God. And, so I felt like it was really our chance to invest in the love we had been trying to work towards. And a week later, I came in the house because I had to look cold, and he was in the whirlpool that just got installed with a 24-year-old bitch, and I was like,
that's not the direction.
I had just turned 30, so I guess I had aged out. I guess, I then was going to become his new, main bitch, but he was going to have this young chick. And so the good news in it is that I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. But the sad thing is I really had just like touched this new reality, and I was so excited. And so that was like, this moment. I'll never forget that, because I was excited to live in this new home with my 3 kids. But then he was already showing me he was going to be, cheating on me too. So.
Let me tell you something, man. Again, a lot, right? a lot. Okay. When I say, when you come to share, you come to share, right? Like you were one of the few people that, okay, because every once in a while, people will grab the mic and they may monologue, right? And there are some people that their comments are so good that you can't tell that they was talking for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Because you just sitting there like, oh shit, this is what we came here for. Like, all right, what you got? And then there's some people that go for a minute and a half, and you just like, man, well, he shut up. Okay? Like, God damn, like this.
Wrap it up, right? I agree.
You be telling them stories, man, and we be like, ooh, wait a minute. So what happened there? Like, you did what?
I agree. Let me start with, I usually go to Tequila Tales with the intention of, I'm just going to listen,
right.
I love taking in all of this info, all of this energy. I love the room. I love the space. But let me just say, from the very first time, I'd be like, no, they did not just say that. Give me the mic. Like, you can't help but want to be a part, and so I think that the space being cultivated for that reason, for us to engage, makes me feel a lot more comfortable, because again, I always come with the intention to listen and to just, receive. But 9 times out of 10, I'd be like, God damn it, I done got on the mic again, because I had to share this moment. And most of the times it's over 2 or 3 points that have come over the night. So let me just get all in this one mic hold.
So, hearing you say that though always makes me feel good, because that's my goal, right? Is a lot of times people come, they may know a little bit about what it is, but they may not have the full totality of it, right? And so they just came for an experience. And then once you realize, like, oh snap, you're supposed to talk, and it's like, I think that people think that we require people to talk, and that's not what it is, right? Like, I mean, I tell people, look, if y'all let me go, I will entertain y'all for 2 hours, okay? But the whole goal is to have this conversation. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to warm people up, but my goal is can I draw you out, and can we have a conversation and create a safe enough space to whereas people feel comfortable with being authentic, right? And I think that when we first started 12 years ago, to be very transparent, for me, it was entertainment. It was entertainment. So the first iteration of it, I was doing it on behalf of some friends that had an art lounge, and it was kind of their concept. And so, kind of leaning into it, I realized the value that it had, but I also knew, oh man, this will be a good TV show. And so I think just having that in my head, when I started doing it on my own, it was always like, because I love to talk and I love a good conversation. I find good conversations entertaining. And I always felt like this would translate well as an event or a TV show. And I realized just knee deep into it, I'm talking about a couple of months in, luckily I have good friends, and people that were around me was letting me know, Ike, I don't know if you realize what it is that you're doing. Like, you are giving people a voice that otherwise might not have felt like they had one. And for me, even when she said it, I mean, it felt good to hear, but because that wasn't where my attention was, and because my focus was, I'm trying to get this to the next level. And so this is before like social media really took a hold on the nation. And, it was always like, nah, this is still entertainment, but thank you. I'm glad to know that you're getting value from it. But I think just throughout the years and going into it deeper, you really do start to appreciate that aspect of like, wow, especially since I've been here in Phoenix, that people will grab this microphone and they will say some things that are incredibly like poignant, and they weren't influencers. They didn't come in because, they were trying to get their, because we have other shows that are even being taped down here in Phoenix, right? That are vastly more popular than we are, right? But most people that get on that show, they're not really looking for love. Most people that get on that show, they're not really looking for something qualitative. They're looking for clout. And no shade, but just saying that, like, when you sign up for certain things, oh, okay, this is popping on YouTube. That's why I'm here. But most people that come to Tequila Tales, their goal is not to go viral. You know what I mean? Like, they probably would prefer we didn't have the cameras going. You know what I'm saying? But knowing that the cameras are going and still having a willingness to share, for me, when I look at it now, understanding even just the gravity of the space that we're in, that to me is one of the biggest compliments, right? Because it lets me know that they understand what the essence is, right? And so that's even what I mean by when I say that, like, I appreciate when you grab the mic, because I know I know the essence of your spirit, I know your character, but I also know that, you like to have fun, and you're an authentic person that, when you grab the microphone, you're going to say some real shit, right? So
only grabbing it for that. I'm only grabbing it for that because usually, it's a really good space to show some gratitude. I saw people saying this the last Tequila Tales, and I'm like, what does that mean? I need to understand that, so I'm gonna have to speak to that. But I felt like Tequila Tales brought us in a room, and my very first experience, it wasn't these experts talking about what to do. It was humans. It was real people talking about our experiences, our feelings, what we believe. And, hearing this gentleman talk about, y'all bear with us, he was in Arizona dating only Mexican girls because he wanted his kids to have good hair. And I was like, oh, and it is a room full of Black women. They ate his ass up, for you to sit here and talk about you want to date a Latino woman so your kids can have good hair. Those Black women got on the mic and they ate him up. And then he came back around and doubled down. And I was like, oh, that meant he felt comfortable. It was a very engaging discussion for me. And so I never anticipated ever getting on the mic. I am a very introverted extrovert. I love to learn. I love to be in a space and absorb. And so there comes a point where you're in the room like, I gotta say something, and so I appreciate having that space. I appreciate hearing the variant of perspectives and feelings and everybody being authentic, because no matter what, you know, wherever I'm at, I have to be my authentic self. That's the only way I know how to deliver. And I think Tequila Tales gave us that. Like, we were very authentic. You know, there was people who wanted to go viral. You really were just contributing to the conversation organically. If the moment was intended to be that, it's going to go viral. You know, you don't have to push for that. Like, that's the difference between reality TV in 2025 and reality TV when it started. Like, we were just authentic. We were just who we are in that space. So I appreciate it, you know, just being able to share that story. Because I
appreciate you remembering what you just said about because that moment that you're talking about, that was at the first Tequila Tales that we had down here, right? And you know, even when I think, and what's crazy is I didn't realize it, I actually had that moment on tape. and that's the thing. That's the thing that I think people also don't realize, is that even though people sign release forms and all that type of stuff, like, if I think that putting something out is going to just put an enormous amount of weight, or you know what I mean, or not even just that, but like, I think it's amazing, because the first iteration of Tequila Tales, like I said, it was entertainment for me, and because we didn't know about the backlash of, kind of like, that was before like pre-Kevin Samuels and Derek Jackson and the men versus women thing. Right. So us entering this space and then even trying to kind of push it out in this virtual world, it was honestly really about trying to get people to have conversations that they were not having. You know what I mean? Like that was really the goal. Is like, I want to get us talking, and I want to encourage men to know that this is a safe space, because I wanted them to know that, like, and so I had to play devil's advocate. Me playing devil's advocate, 9 times out of 10, I was playing devil's advocate against women. Now, not in an adversarial type of a way, but it was more in a, okay, the few men that are in here, they're afraid to grab the microphone because typically we would get treated a certain way. And so I had to be the one to take all the arrows, and the men would just sit there. When I tell you, the first couple of years, men would sit there like this. Yeah. Right. And then after the event, everybody coming up to me, shaking my hand strong and hard, like, bro. Like,
right. Because they know they don't have the balls to say, because let's be honest, when we go out in spaces here in Phoenix, the room is outnumbered women over men, right? Even Tequila Tales, like, I'm always hoping for, you know, a few more men to contribute, because there is a very huge difference of a perspective and opinion between men and women. And so you having to play that role was critical. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on the stance you were sitting, you needed to play that role in order for us to really pull on the strings of the conversation. And so it was valuable. And so that was the thing. Like, when I talked about people, you got to come on to Tequila Tales. You know, Casey was talking to us in Prescott about you bringing Tequila Tales to Arizona. And like, we were like, yeah, this sounds cool. This is exciting. You know, it was fun to me because, one, we need to come together as a Black culture, right? And then we need to hear the opposite perspectives. Women are typically, y'all, we are so emotional in our perspective, in our response. Men don't always know how to receive that. And so they stand and they sit and they're not emotional in their response. And so they just kind of receive it. And so there is a very need to understand the opposite person, right? I'm fortunate that, as much as I am a lady and I've got feminine energy, I resonate more with men because I don't lead with emotion. When I am making decisions or thinking processes through, emotion is put to the backside. And most women, we lead with that. And men don't necessarily, their response to that is, oh shit, you know, okay, girl, and so they're not very emotional. And so it's very important that we hear those perspectives. So I love Tequila Tales for that reason. I know when I talked about a high value man, I got attacked right? Do you remember that conversation? I was like, listen, I'm 48, I am not necessarily dating today, but if I do, I'm looking for a high value man. And, Ashley, your man ate me up because he thought I meant high value meant his income. And
Right.
if you ever listen to Samuel, he never taught that wasn't about an income. It really was about emotional intelligence. It was about your spirit. It was about all these other layers that you bring to the universe, not just a relationship, but to the universe. Who are you as a person? And I need a person who is elevated past, we all have shit we go through. Have you healed through that? Have you really gained an understanding and a perspective on respecting other people's perspective? So that's what I value.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think that has been fascinating about doing the show down here, which was an unexpected, like an unexpected nuance, is the fact that the Black community is still, by and large, we don't really have big numbers. You know what I'm saying? And so, throwing an event that is kind of catered to us also provides just a safe space in general, not just from, whether you're a man or you're a woman, but just from a community perspective. And so that was really, I think, what I was always trying to also tap into is I want to curate more spaces where we can actually just have conversations and the conversation becomes the backdrop, because really what it is it's the overall experience. It's being in the presence of our culture. It's being, because one thing about Phoenix, and I'm a fan of Phoenix, to be clear. I'm not one of those people that talk shit about Phoenix because I'm from Chicago. I come from an area that, where we have a large Black population. I actually recognize Phoenix for the value that it is and how incredibly diverse this city is. But one thing that we do not have is a centralized hub. Normally, that's where the Black people stay. Oh, that's the Black neighborhood. That's the Black side. That's the whatever. And when you think about it down here, we're dispersed. So even though we really don't even have numbers as it is, then when you try to say to yourself, especially if you're an implant and you're searching for that community, that's like a pilgrimage almost. You know what I mean? And there's only a few things that you know of. There's Poetic Soul Wednesdays nights. There's First Fridays at the Legion, if that's your vibe, or a couple other little things that's kind of sprinkled in. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I got excited because it was like, okay, I know that this is going to be a very small, very niche community, but at the same time, it might be very it's something special what happens when you circle the wagons, right? Like when I think about the Wednesday Poetic Soul, shout out to Q and what it is that he's done with that platform, because when I first went, I was entertained, but admittedly, I'm calling the fellas back at the crib like, yo, you wouldn't believe, man, one of the biggest events for Black people is a spoken word event. You know what I mean? It's a spoken word open mic. And I was almost being sarcastically, not full on ridiculing it, because I enjoyed it, but it was like, man, we ain't been doing that since Love Jones. And then the more I realized it, I'm like, damn, this shit is actually pretty lit. And I'm like, because of the fact that we're in a desert, right? And he's kind of created a bit of an oasis.
Sure.
He is able to do something here that's actually more difficult to do than in Chicago. Because in Chicago, if you tried to do that exact same thing, you'd be hard pressed to get 25 to 40 people in that room. And week after week, this man got 200 plus that's coming up to not only hop on the stage, but to just experience it, holistically. And so it's almost like what you start to realize is that sometimes the few is the many, and sometimes there's strength in this little incubated community. And so I stopped looking at Phoenix for what it wasn't and started recognizing we all coming from these different areas. You from Wisconsin, I'm from Illinois, somebody else from California, somebody else from New York. But then when we find ourselves in this room, I'm like, man, as much as I love Tequila Tales in Chicago, because we had a vibe there, at times it can be a little monolithic, whereas you're here And this room is super diverse. Even while being Black, it's super diverse from an age perspective, as well as from a, experience perspective. And what that created from a conversation was like, I don't know what y'all about to say up in here. And, people like yourself is grabbing this microphone, and y'all never once shied away from getting deep. We can get playful and be silly at times, but then when I wanted to go deep, y'all was right there with me.
Because let me push back a little bit, only because, and not in a negative way. I have to push back a little bit because here was my thought. When I came here, I was like, oh my God, where's all the Black people? Da, 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 da. Like, we all have this shock moment when you come from spaces like Detroit or Chicago or Milwaukee, only because in our cities, there was the hood, right? You knew where that was. I could find the sock man. I could find the booster. I could find.
Did you say the sock man? Oh, stop it.
Like when I went home last year, I got me and my kids some socks. And my son was like, Mom, I always wear Nike and da-da-da-da-da. I was like, bro, I'll keep them socks. You know what I'm saying? Like, sock man, because as a single mom, socks was expensive for 3 kids. Nonetheless, when I moved here, I was like, oh my God, like, where's the Black community? Where's the Black culture? And so immediately, as somebody who is a numbers person, I started looking at the numbers. And let me tell you what I found. There are the same number of Black people here in Phoenix that there are in Milwaukee. The difference is Maricopa is higher on largest cities. Okay. And so what that means is we are more of a minority here, because what I started earlier in this conversation is Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the country. When Obama became president, he was like, hold on, I got to go to Milwaukee and see what's going on, because we had very low education. It was all this white around us, but all Milwaukee was Black. So the whole city was the hood. And so when you move to a city like Phoenix, we're spread about. All right. That's the difference. But the number of us was the same. And so once I understood that, I said, okay, my people are here. So then you have to be intentional about finding them. You have to be intentional about going where they are. And so I learned early, Phoenix people get a little bit lazy. And I think it's because we come from those areas where I could just take 2-3 steps and my people was right here. And so now you are in a new city. You chose to come here. You need to understand what that looks like, what that means, where we are, because now you're starting to see AZ Black Run Group, the tennis group. I play tennis, y'all. I have fun. I'm going this Saturday. I literally am now intentional about seeking my people, and we are here. And so you have to then engage. And so when I found the tequila tales, I was like, okay, y'all want to talk. Y'all want to have real conversations. And so it felt exciting to me. It felt mature. It felt like, a space for, okay, if y'all talking about any Black people here, this is intimate. You can be who you are. You can be authentic. You can learn, because we need to be learning from each other. We are all very different. We're all coming from different spaces. Driving is different. As simple as that sounds. So we have to be willing to understand and learn. And so that's why I like Tequila Tales. That's why I like the space and allowing us to be authentic. That's the highest vibe your body will ever give off.
You know what? I appreciate that. And I have absolutely no disagreements with what it is that you just shared. And, I'll just share this with you, before, I wrap, that, this is going to be the last live Tequila Tales at Onyx. And actually, I'll even be a little bit more transparent, because I think I can do it on this particular stream, because they haven't really been very open with it just yet. And we're going to make the official announcement at the event, but Onyx Gallery is closing. And so that's really what it is. Yeah. And, you know, I want to go on the record as just having said, and I'm gonna say this tonight, I'm gonna say it on Thursday, and I'm gonna continue to say it. Like, Kathy and Vernon are my family, and these are the owners of Honest Gallery, and they are two of the most amazing individuals that were literally godsends on many levels. Like, there is absolutely no way I would have been able to bring Tequila Tales to Phoenix without not only their support, their assistance, but their encouragement and investment, right? Like, to me, they are pretty much partners in this endeavor, right? Because not only have they been very like understanding and like I said, investing, you know, as it relates to the business aspect of what it takes to put a Tequila Tales on. Because normally when we would do Tequila Tales, it's got to be in a certain type of environment, because the way that it's financed, we got to make certain that we, as much as possible, can remain in the green. And to really put on a production like that, you know, it costs a lot of money, but I don't want to turn around and pass that cost off to, you know, local patrons that I want to build a community with, you know what I'm saying? But if I really had to charge what it costs to throw it, it would have been something that just did not allow it to occur. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I could only do that because Kathy and Vernon, as partners, not only wanted it there, they were fans of ours before, you know, we came down here, but they have been like lock, stock, and barrel. And, you know, with not only with their suggestions, their time, you know, with, you know, you got Vernon that is working the sound for me, and, you know, Kathy that's, you know, front house and just things of this nature. Like, they were literally, as far as I'm concerned, partners in it. And so it's been an incredibly beautiful experience. When she and I had the conversation, you know, what's crazy about life and what's crazy about just God is that movements already started happening where some things started to kind of present themselves that made the next stage of evolution very clear, right? Sure. And without going into the specifics, I'll just say it might be pretty fucking big, right? Like, it might be something very special, right? Like, I can't, you know, knock on wood, it's still a little muddy, but I know I've gotten very sensitive to the voice of God when God is pointing you in a direction. And there was a little hesitation. And when Kathy and I had the conversation that we had, it just really removed any type of hesitation that I had, you know, any apprehension to let me know, okay, I kind of sensed that might have been the universe, but it was confirmation, you know. And when she and I had our conversation, you know, their decision, I completely agreed with. I'm in full support of, you know, and I don't think that that's the end of Onyx Gallery. It's just the end of Onyx Gallery at that particular location. You know, it's one of those situations where when you really kind of survey the land and you really do the cost benefit analysis, you become very much aware of like the value that you add, you know, the opportunities that you're presenting people with, you know. But at the end of the day, it is a business, right? And there are times where, you know, I think we even kind of touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of just, you know, with you, right? Like, I'm pretty certain that your salary wasn't necessarily easy to walk away from, but there's moments where you realize that you got to know when to hold them, you got to know when to fold them, you got to know what's right for your spirit, what's right for your growth, what's right for your evolution. And in those moments, that decision isn't something that you know, you take lightly. But when you take it, you know what the gravity is, and there's a sense of peace when you know that you're doing, when you're making a shrewd decision that's wise, right? And so that kind of is what that is.
That part, the value of peace, right? People don't really talk about that. Put a value on it. You can't. You really cannot put a dollar value to your peace. And so you only get one lifetime. You get to experience it in the ways you desire. And so if this is time to end, just trust and believe God's got something bigger and better for you planned on the other side. And so as long as we don't fear that, as long as we know, this has been a pathway to, you said it now, something bigger. That the onyx space is beautiful. It was very appropriate, right, for you to plant the seed for Tequila Tales. And so that gave the onyx the eyes, because a lot of us had never been there and never heard of the space. And so it was very twofold in terms of the beneficiary aspects. And so now, everybody continues to grow and build layers, and it's okay. People are very much going to ask me before they understand, what I'm going into next, are you okay about
Right.
my job? That is normal. That is human. That is very human. And we have to be human. And I appreciate those people who are like, before I make sure you celebrate, you good? You good? What does that mean? Because they know clearly I have to be walking away from a substantial salary. But whatever that salary was it worth the value of my peace? Was it worth the value of my life? That I only get one. And I said I was working 9 to 9. My kids are grown. I am a grandmother now. And so there comes a time where I've got to take that time back and do something bigger and better for me, to leave that legacy for my ancestors to say, damn, girl, you are our wildest dreams. And that is what's important to me. So I appreciate, that transparency and whatever they're doing. I just hope and pray that it's bigger and better for them as well. So thank you for bringing this to Phoenix, who needs more little doses of Black culture that's authentic. And this for me was that.
TJ, before I let you go, can you tell us about this new venture with your podcast? I don't want to let you go before you just share with us. You're embarking upon new territory, which is exciting. And I've been tapped in, and I like what I'm seeing thus far. So can you just share with us about this new road that you're journeying down?
Absolutely. So the podcast, let's talk about it. The podcast is a birth child of the Black HR Society. When I started the org, BHRS, which is a passion project, it is not a for-profit. It is a non-profit organization that really just pours back into the community. But I started the org, and I said to the team, I want to do a podcast. I really want to use our voices to give back to the community. And so I want to say about 2 years ago, we started talking about this podcast. And so I'm going to call it a manifestation, because I manifested this to really give people a couple of different things. Entertainment. We talk about HR because there is a very, very bad stigma around HR professionals. There is this concept that HR professionals are only for the company, and in one aspect, absolutely, we are hired to ensure the company remains in compliance. But let me share this with y'all. In order for us to remain compliant, that also means we have to do what's right for the employee, because we have all of these policies that are written to protect the company and the employee. And so for the two to merge together, HR exists. And so, yes, there is an aspect of us that protects the company, but we do that by a lot of times saying, what's the right thing to do? And I am one of those people that is built on strong character. When I'm making HR choices, it's from what's the right thing to do to protect the interests of both the employee and the company. And so we talk about pop culture, what's happening in the world, but there's an intersection of HR in that. So tap in. We are launching a show on Thursday at 1 p.m. Ayana Baker, who is our compliance officer. She's also a DEI specialist. So y'all see what's happening in the DEI space. She gives us her perspective on that and what that means. So tap into Let's Talk About It. If you want to be a guest on the show, TJ at wewannatotalkaboutit.com, because we want to talk about anything and everything. So you can hit me up there, or if you want to be a sponsor, we'd love to have you and invite you to join us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, that's dope. Listen, man, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you jumping on. Like I said, you add tremendous value on so many levels, right? Like I remember the first information that I learned about you, and this is a little personal, but I'll share it anyway. When you first met Casey and you guys were at the, like, I think it was like a bridal shower. And I know you're a bit of like intuitive, kind of like you have clairvoyant, tendencies, and you spoke into Casey, and I remember her sharing with me about that, and just you feeling the energy of her mother that had passed, and you didn't even know that her mother had passed, and you were just sharing things about it. And that really touched her, especially like during that period, because she had, had transitioned for a few years. But, it's one of those things where even though time can maybe make dealing with it easier, it's a pain that never goes away, right? Their presence you always continuously feel. And so for you to, in a moment where it's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on,
right,
to be into Casey and to have that moment with her, like that for her was like the highlight of that weekend for her. And she fell in love with all of you guys during that weekend. And she was a little apprehensive about going at first. I was actually surprised that she did it. It was very unlike her, because she's an introvert also. Like, she likes to kick it, but it was just like, oh, you're just out here, huh? You know what I mean? But whatever. But it ended up being just very serendipitous. And, when, like I said, I just remembered you from that. And then, you came to the first Tequila Tales. I got an opportunity to meet you, but obviously it was like, just interactions, not only through Tequila Tales, but just when I had an opportunity to see you out and about and stuff like that. But man, you have been solid. And hearing about this podcast is exciting, right? And largely because I can tell when certain people kind of have that factor, that it factor, where they just naturally are comfortable inside of a space, and it feels like a very cohesive relationship, right? And so I wasn't surprised when I heard about this. Like, sometimes I hear about people, and I'm gonna be very honest, right? Like,
right.
You hear about people stepping into this space, and you just be like, man, stop it! Like, you just
right.
Everybody want a podcast all of a sudden, and you just like, I do, whatever, right? But like, when I heard about you doing it, and even just knowing, like, not only do you have that capacity to share your thoughts in a very like warm, inviting, and dynamic way, but that you like to execute things at a high level, right? And so even while figuring it out, because we all got to build the plane as it takes off. One thing I never question is whether or not you're going to put your whole heart and soul into it, and if it bears your name and your stamp of approval on it, it's going to be something that's going to be worth tapping into. And so I'm excited that you're embarking upon this new journey. I was excited to hear about this new journey of entrepreneurship, and then also just even your excitement and that you did so on your own accord. Because I know sometimes like life will force us into something begrudgingly, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but there ain't nothing like when you make a decision because that's what you wanted to do. And so you kind of walk into it, with clear mind, clear intention, no regrets. That's a different way of embarking upon a new journey, right? So regardless of what obstacles or whatever comes, you already know that you're here and that you have a purpose, right? And so thank you for, gracing me once again. And as you already know, you on the list. You know what I'm saying? So if you are available on Thursday, you know, I can't wait to see you. Otherwise, you gonna see us again. You know what I'm saying on the next iteration of Tequila Tales. But yeah, no, thank you. Anything you want to say before I close? I'll go ahead and give you the stage.
I really like, my heart is just warm, leaving a very stable job and, having this reputation behind you is this whole new venture. And what's exciting for me is so many people got behind me. They were like, you got this, you ready, and that feels good. We need that. We need these cheerleaders supporting us, because we get in our own heads, we get that imposter syndrome. And so I really appreciate my circle, all the people who have been there to support me, even in their hesitation, like, you good, how you feel about this? And then when they know that I'm ready, they're like, you got this. Like, that just makes me feel so much more empowered, and you spoke of something really, really important to me that I don't really speak about publicly. When I met Casey and Prescott, and really just kind of felt the energy of, it wasn't just her mom, it was both of her parents that came through. I am very, very skeptical, right? When those energies start coming through me, I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not as religious, let me just separate the two. I'm very much more spiritual. And when those things come through, I had to learn. I had to, one, be obedient, right? And saying, okay, this spirit is coming through, girl, go ahead and share this message with this person, because it's not for me. That message wasn't for me when her parents came through. It was for her for whatever reason. And so I have to remove myself and say, it's okay. And also be cautious, because some people don't believe. Some people look at you crazy. But the moment I began to share with her, her parents were coming through, we both got this feeling of like, just refreshing, of knowing it was real. And so we've connected from day one. And so I appreciate her. I appreciate her for tapping in and saying, you need to connect and come to Tequila Tales, and you need to, meet Isaac. And so it was that energy that brought us together today. And so I believed in what I'm being told. I am a person of faith. When I'm being told to do what I'm being told, I'm obedient, because my obedience has paid off. It is the reason for the blessings I've received. And so, as scary as it is sometimes when that clairvoyance comes through, I just lean in. It has been scary, because I remember telling the dude who I was dating, your daddy said XYZ, and his daddy had passed away. And he was like, girl, get out my house, and I was like, oh my God, So my sister was like, girl, everybody ain't there, everybody's not ready for that. But fast forward, he then called me back and was like, can you come over? And, he realized that energy I was giving him was real. And so even in that space, I don't question it. I just move and move by faith. And so in this new phase of living my mission out loud and living my purpose out loud, they call me Harriet Tubman. I have freed myself from modern day slavery, and my goal is to help my people get free too. So y'all tap in if y'all want to get off that plantation. I got you.
Well, once again, thank you very much, DJ. And, until the next time.
Thank you.
So, you guys, as always, man, it has been a pleasure. Hopefully you guys have seen as much or gotten as much value from this as I have. One of the things that I said that I wanted to start doing, especially with this particular platform, is I wanted to start highlighting people that are important to me. Right. And, and I what I'm about to say, I've said this numerous times before, and this is not a flex. It feels like a flex, but it really isn't one. I feel like I'm the Warren Buffett of relationships. And, I was saying that before I realized that he and I have the exact same birthday and the exact same astrological makeup, which was crazy. But I almost feel that I'm a magnet for great people. And when we talk about great, it was just like me and TJ were saying a moment ago. You know, you talk about high value. It's like some people can determine high value from like artificial metrics, and then other people see high value more as like overall quality of life, right? Overall character, morality, and just so many other aspects of what adds quality to your world. And, you know, I wanted to start sharing this space with people, and start having more conversations that I think have purpose. You know, there's so much that's going on in this world. And, you know, I feel like every time that we wake up, it's like a barrage. It is a clear barrage. It feels like an assault on our senses, where we just can recognize that the world is off its axis right now. And if you're not careful, you can kind of lean into that energy, and it can start to color your day-to-day world. It can almost make you not only doubt, but it can be draining, you know. And one of the things that I want to start kind of keying into more is just various ways of how we can uplift our energy. How can we uplift our vibration, right? And one of the things that TJ was saying was about being intentional, you know, and that word intentionality is so incredibly important, right? It is so incredibly important because I think it's going to literally become the lifeblood of our community, right? I talk a lot about us circling the wagons and what that looks like. And every day it becomes a little more clear of what it looks like when you circle the wagons. And so to me, what that means is it means you might have to take an extra step in order to cultivate something. You know, I think that we live in a world where we've gotten very comfortable with things being on demand. I'm used to, I just key into it and it's right there, you know, when I want it to be. But now we're about to live into a world where you might have to inconvenience yourself just a little bit, so that you can give your resources in spaces that mean something to you, right? So that means like being very intentional with how we spend our dollars and being very intentional with how we spend our most important commodity, which is our time, right? Who and how are you spending your time? Because that's the one commodity you cannot get back. Who are you platforming, right? You know, we all have a voice. We all have social media. If 80 to 90% of what you post on social media is about things that you do not like, is about things that frustrate you, it's about the haters. Well, what you're doing is you are investing time and energy into these sources, into these areas that are not going to produce results, right? What happens when you start to pull a little bit of that investment back and you start to place it into things that you do want to see, right? When you start to invest in creating the change in the world that you want to see, like how different of a world can we create when we really start to invest in the things that we want to see? Because I'm telling y'all, and I don't care about your political background, but one thing about this current administration and the head of this current administration is what they want to do, what they are great at is sequestering all of your attention, right? Because that's all they want at the end of the day. They want your attention because they understand that that's where the value lies. Social media understands it. Television understands it. Advertisers understand it. Business understands it. Wherever you focus your attention, that's going to be the thing that grows. And so we have to be very, very careful because they're getting so good at manipulating us, right? When it comes to this algorithm, you know, we talk about the algorithm sometimes like it's a big boogeyman, but on a level, it really is. I've seen it firsthand, right? I've seen it. I've seen how when we post certain kind of posts, oh, that takes off. But then when you post something else that I really think is uplifting, the engagement is dope, the viewership is low. And I'm like, okay, when I look at that, this should have actually gotten served to way more people. But then you start to realize like, okay, they may actually be manipulating the algorithm, right? They are controlling the information. They are controlling the information. Now, they're not going to stop us from posting, but they do run your news feed. They do run the airwaves, right? So if you are waiting to see what information they're going to feed to you, I guarantee you it's not going to be something that's uplifting. I guarantee you it's not going to be something that makes you feel better. And we know this playbook. They've been doing it on the nightly news since even before 24-hour news networks, right? They always lead with murder, death, destruction, because they know that that's going to keep you locked in. So if you want to change your world, you got to be very intentional with how you spend your time, what you're focusing in on. And it means that if there are things you like, you can't wait for your news feed to serve it up to you. If there are things you like, you have to actively go out and invest in it, right? Because I promise you, shit goes away sometimes. And then people are like, what happened to that thing? Man, we really used to enjoy that. Man, you remember that restaurant? Yeah, well, it's no longer in business because as much as you loved it, you never supported it. And I get it. You can't always come out. You can't always, patronize it. But you got something that you can do, right? And that's what we got to start doing. We got to start using our voices, right? Even if you can't come out to your buddy's show, he's got a comedy show. You know, he grinding, you love him. You can't come out to his show, share his content, right? Even if it's a story, something, because two things are going to happen. One, that person who you just supported, you're probably going to encourage them. You're probably going to encourage them to go forward a little more, because that's the one thing that sometimes people take for granted. You assume that people know how you feel about them. You assume that people know how much you love them, how much you respect them, how much you admire them, how much you appreciate them. They don't know it if you don't say it. They don't know it if you don't say it. You have to start being more vocal, right? Stop assuming it. This is one of the things that they teach you. If you are ever in a situation and something is happening and you need someone to call the cops, you don't scream out, somebody call the cops, because everybody will assume that somebody else called the cops. You literally have to look at a person and say, you call the cops, right? Because if left to their own devices, people assume everybody else is supporting that thing. And then all of a sudden it goes away and we're trying to figure out what happened to it. How come we don't have no more of this? Or how come they don't have this? Well, because when they do it, you guys don't support it, right? And support doesn't always mean financially. It doesn't always mean you got to give your all, but you do have to be intentional. You got to start looking for ways to encourage the things that you want to see more of. And that is the world that we are in, right? Because right now, government and the nation at large seems to have a target on many of our backs, right? So when we do circle these wagons, what it means is we got to start figuring out how to recycle. We got to start figuring out how to benefit one another. You know what I mean? And I'm not just talking about charity, because I'm not saying support that person that's not putting effort or not grinding, that's not adding qualitative things. But I do know that there are times where people are very quiet with their praise. You're very vocal about the things you don't like, right? When you get bad service at that restaurant, oh, you're going to go on social media. You're going to let everybody know how shitty of a service you just got. But then when you love it, when you had an absolute great time, do you call the manager? Do you call the GM and let them know, man, I got some of the best service that I just got from this waiter earlier today, right? Do you go on social media and sing high praises to that business that gives you that quality product? We got to start being that way, because if we do not, then ultimately we're going to be controlled by those who have another agenda, right? And so that's pretty much what I want to leave you guys with. What I did, if you all look inside of the chat right now, I posted the link. If you are in Arizona, we do have some tickets remaining. But I got a feeling it's going to be a packed house, right? So you probably don't want to wait until the last minute, right? But this is going to be us properly sending off Onyx Gallery. We've got a cigar lounge, we've got a live band, we've got a DJ, and it just so happens that the weather is going to be beautiful also, right? So it's going to be a good time, and we're going to have a great conversation as always. But I will always let you guys know that this isn't farewell. Like I said, we got some more stuff in the works, but it might be a little while, right? So don't wait for that. Go ahead and come out and kick it with us, and let's send Tequila Tales and Onyx off properly. But once again, you guys, man, love you. And until the next time. Oh, you know what? Wait a minute. Hold on. Look at me. Look at me. See. Normally, I've already got this part queued up, but yeah, y'all get it.